All right. Hey there, and welcome to another episode of the OCD and Anxiety Show. My name is Matt Cotty, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker and the founder of Restored Minds. And so, on this episode today, I want to talk about re-looking at or re-understanding the problem of OCD and anxiety, right? Because anytime you wrestle with OCD and anxiety, it's the number one mistake that we make is we assume that we're dealing with a thought and feeling problem. In fact, that is one of the biggest problems with anxiety disorders as a whole, is that we have this preconceived belief or perception or idea in our mind that we are not supposed to feel anxious, that anxiety is bad. It is a disease, a disorder. So the mere presence of anxiety, whenever it surfaces in our body or our minds, we then try to get rid of it, right? Because again, we have a preconceived notion that, well, anxiety is bad, right? I'm not supposed to have this. I'm not supposed to have the intrusive thoughts. This experience is abnormal, and therefore I need to address it, right? And to go off this idea, what we need to understand is how we understand a problem is going to determine the actions we take to resolve it, which is then going to determine the results that we get. So if we misunderstand a problem and then we take actions based on that misunderstanding, we're not going to get the results that we want to get. Okay. Think of it, a simple analogy would be this. Like, let's pretend that you had a backyard and it was full of dirt, and one morning you started to see that it was just full of mud, right? And you're trying to get mud out of the backyard, and by taking a shovel and just throwing it out over the fence. And every morning there's just more and more mud, right? And you're trying to get rid of the mud, right? But the real problem is that there's a broken pipe up the hill from your house that's leaking water into the backyard, which is just generating more and more and more mud. Okay. And so how you understand that problem is going to determine how you try to resolve it, which is going to determine the results that you get, right? Naturally, if you try to just get rid of the mud and let the water keep flowing in, you're going to lead to a lot of frustration, right? It's going to lead to a lot of frustration. And in many ways, that's what happens with OCD and anxiety, right? When we try to get rid of something like anxiety or thoughts that are intrusive thoughts, or just physical sensations in the body, the reality is we don't have the power to just do that. We don't have the power to just shift an emotional experience and get rid of it, or more importantly, never experience it. Because if we do that, then what happens is we start avoiding things that trigger us, and we start living a smaller and smaller and smaller life, right? And so if we understand anxiety as the problem itself, we're naturally going to move to try to get rid of it. And that is paradoxically what creates more of it, right? When we get more sensitive to triggers, our lives become smaller. If we try to get rid of intrusive thoughts, we paradoxically create more of them, right? It's a complete paradox how the recovery process works. And this is why when it comes to OCD and anxiety, I always talk about understanding it in the context of a loop, right? So this loop has these four components, right? It has the thoughts, the intrusive thoughts. Usually they're what if, futuristic, or past based thoughts, right? They could be intrusive images, but there are some kind of images that then cause an emotional distress within us, right? This is what we call psychological stress. Our brain has the ability to create an idea that then puts our body into the fight or flight response, or the stress response. So it's created psychologically, right? We're triggering out our own stress response by a mere idea in our mind. And that idea, as a whole, is really fascinating and a pretty interesting phenomenon when you really just step back and look at it, right? But so you have this psychological stress that's created, and this is what we call anxiety, right? And the reason that we call it that is because we're getting stressed out about something that is not currently happening. Right? We're literally going into a fight or flight response over an event that doesn't exist, may never exist, or if it's in the past, event that currently doesn't exist because it already happened. And this is one of the reasons that anxiety is so uncomfortable, right? Is because we're generating this stress response, this fight or flight response that's designed to put us in motion, and nothing's happening, right? Like so this discomfort, what it comes from is this excess energy in our body. And then we do a behavior to neutralize that feeling, Okay, because we think that because we're experiencing this energy, this must be bad. And now we need to get rid of it by doing a behavior. Now we do various mental behaviors, physical behaviors. And again, I have more episodes on that, so I won't go into this but in depth, but that produces a relief in us. And then what happens is that because we did a behavior to neutralize that feeling or neutralize the thought, it reinforces the idea in our brain that that actually was dangerous, or it actually was something that we should have addressed. And this loop begins. And this is what we're talking about here. This is why we need to understand OCD and anxiety from a loop perspective. Because if we understand it from a loop perspective, what that enables us to do is to focus on solving the right problem. Like I said before, how you understand the problem is going to determine the actions you take. The actions you take are going to determine the results you get. Okay. And when we're talking about results, we're talking about recovery, right? We're talking about taking back our life from this. If we understand this as a thought problem, we are going to try to stop thoughts, which is paradoxically, again, going to engage in safety behaviors, which is going to reinforce the loop, and the loop is going to spin more. If we understand this as a feeling problem, right, and we try to get rid of anxiety, we're going to do behaviors like avoidance or checking or reassurance or washing, whatever, that's going to cause the loop to spin. So the more and more we try to focus on getting rid of thoughts and feelings, or understand this even in the context as a thought and feeling problem, we are going to do behaviors that are going to keep the loop going. Okay, it's so important that you understand this, right? Because how you understand the problem, again, is going to determine the actions you take. The actions you take are going to determine the results you get. So it's just like the mud in the backyard, you know, if you see it as a mud problem and that's all you see and you try to get rid of the mud, well, you're going to keep doing that endlessly because the water's leaking into the backyard. If all you need to do really is just turn off the pipe that's broken up the hill, right? So what I'm saying is that given that same analogy, right, we're not talking about just turning off our feelings in that instance, but what we are talking about is stopping anything that is perpetuating the wheel. And in this case, what we're talking about is safety behaviors. This is why it's so important to understand OCD and anxiety from a behavioral standpoint. This is why we use behavioral treatment to address anxiety. This is why the gold standard of OCD and anxiety treatment is behavioral intervention, right? It has nothing to do with getting rid of anxiety. It has nothing to do with stopping thoughts. Like any treatment center out there, right, who really understands OCD and anxiety is going to use behavioral intervention because they understand the model from a loop model, not from a thought and feeling model. And this is why how you, if you want to get better and you want to really move into those stages of recovery, you have to begin seeing this from a loop and behavior problem. When you understand the problem from that context, it changes everything. And what it does is it puts you back in charge because you're in charge of your behavior. Okay. And that is usually the most empowering thing for people on this journey, because one of the most disempowering things for people is that they've been trying. It's not that people aren't trying to get better and get help. It's usually they're just trying things that they're trying to change things that are beyond their control, which causes a lot of frustration because they feel disempowered. They feel powerless right after that. If you try to stop your thoughts all day, you're going to find it's going to be an exhausting battle that's going to get you nowhere. It's like picking up mud in the backyard and just coming out to see way more mud in the next day. It's exhausting. It's overwhelming. And this is how most people feel with OCD and anxiety. And it's not because of a lack of effort. It's just a misplaced effort. It's an effort that's channeled into the wrong things. And when we start to understand this from a loop perspective, we start to focus our energy on changing our behaviors, what happens is we break the loop. The loop can't spin. And then ultimately, the ripple effect of that occurs where we actually get out of the fear lens, our body habituates, and our body is essentially able to go back to a homeostatic state. Right. And this is so the paradox is by trying to get rid of anxiety, you create more of it. By actually allowing anxiety to be there and allowing your body to return to normal, that is how you actually break out of it. Right. It's a complete paradox. And once you get that, then the question obviously becomes, well, how do I it obviously becomes, how do I eliminate all my behaviors? And so it starts with really taking that inventory of all the behaviors you do, right? And, we have a guide at Restored Minds that you can get started with on that, right? So if you haven't been over to Restored Minds, there's a little guide. It's like 16 pages or something like that, but it's free, right? And you can download it and literally go through the safety behaviors, really start to understand the AAA response and how that can help you on your journey, because it really, understanding it from this perspective is going to change your entire model on how you operate, which is going to determine the results or the actions you're going to take, which is going to determine the results you get. And I wanted to make this episode because it's just so important that how we look at a problem determines everything. And so many people misperceive this problem and ultimately engage in the wrong behaviors that paradoxically perpetuate it. And when really this doesn't have to be something, this is not a life sentence. You can get better. You can recover. Okay. And it really comes back down to shifting the way you perceive it, shifting the actions that you take, and which will ultimately determine the results that you'll get on your journey to recovery. So hopefully this episode has been helpful and you see the context in what I'm saying, and even using that digging the mud analogy may be helpful, because if you feel like you've been doing the same thing again and again and you're getting nowhere, instead of continuing to try it, right, and instead of continuing to engage in behaviors that really are just keeping you stuck, you have to step back and look at this from a wheel model, a loop model, whatever you want to call it. And then you look at what you can actually change in that wheel, which is your behaviors. And by breaking that wheel, that is the answer to your success on this journey. So, so thank you so much for hanging out today and just kind of going along with me on this. For more resources, over at restoredminds.com, we have a guide you can start with. We have a free training. We also have our different programs, from taking back control to our group and our individual coaching programs. So we are here to support you on this journey. If this is something you wrestle with, so you can please, there's some links right down in the notes so you can check it out and head over there. And and other than that, I just wish you guys a great week. I hope you guys all had a great Thanksgiving. And I look forward to continuing this journey and seeing you on the next episode. Take care. Thank you so much for watching that video. And so if you're struggling with OCD and anxiety, I just wanted to let you know that we have a free training for you over at Restored Minds, where you can start learning how to use our AAA response to really break out of that loop and ultimately take back control of your life. And all you need to do to access is just click the little link below and you'll be taken to a page where you can register today. Thank you so much.